We would like to welcome you to the 64th year of African Liberation Day and the 74th year of Palestine and Nakba Day. This celebration today is under this year's theme, which is unleashing an offensive of 64 years of African Liberation Day, intensifying the revolutionary struggle against capitalism and imperialism, Zionism and neocolonialism, forward to Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. That's the overall theme for this month, which is African Liberation Month, which is under the direction of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC. This particular program is geared toward addressing the issue and the theme of Pan-Africanism and socialism in the 21st century. The topic is 21st socialism, forever. That is the topic of this particular program. What we seek to do today is to talk about the critical need to understand this whole concept of Pan-Africanism and this whole concept of socialism, because that is the future for humanity. And the more we understand something, the better we can apply it and make it come in fruition into reality. And this is what we want to do. So we basically like to have a dialogue later on with our participants on this whole question of Pan-Africanism and socialism. There are two words that often when they are discussed in the manner of confusion, which we believe the enemy does that intentionally. And also they are discussed in the manner of out of ignorance, not knowing its proper history. So we're going to try to clarify some of these issues and things tonight. And to do this, we also will present some information on different areas and struggles of people of the world. So you can maybe get a better sense and glimpse of this whole question, the need for Pan-Africanism and socialism. So those are our objectives, attempts for tonight. At this point in time, what we want to do is we're going to show a video footage by Brother Kwame Ture from Sofa Carmichael. He's one of the leading practitioner and theoretician on the concept of Pan-Africanism. He's going to talk about Pan-Africanism and socialism as a representative of the All African People's Revolutionary Party and one of the founders of this party. He introduced this party to Africans in America in the year 1972. So anyway, let's go to this footage, and when we come back, we will continue down this road.
Pan-Africanism must come from the bottom up, from the masses of the people up. It is here then that we've come to see the real aspect of Pan-Africanism. We said that in the 5th Pan-African Congress, they called for mass organizations, and immediately mass organizations sprang up throughout the length and breadth of the African world. The Conventional People's Party, a mass party, sprang up in Ghana. The Democratic Party of Guinea, a mass party, sprang up in Guinea. Throughout the length and breadth of Africa, you had TANU, the Tanzanian African National Union, which is now the CCM. My Swahili is not as good as yours. Chumpa, Chimpuraza, Mazuri.
That's very good.
Oh, my Swahili is bad. Thank you. Chapa Chapman Puduzi. Exactly. And that's their new party. But all over Africa, mass parties sprung up. If you look at the Caribbean, mass parties sprung up. And if you look at the United States, mass movements sprang up. So the call was heeded for mass confrontation. Of course, the 5th Pan-African Congress made two definite and precise resolutions which I want to highlight. Of course, Pan-Africanism from the very beginning was anti-colonial. From the very beginning, it was anti-colonial. It was weak. So when they came, they didn't say to the Queen, we're going to put you out of the country. They said, you must treat the natives right. You must educate them. You must prepare them for self-government. These are things that are weak, but they were anti-colonial in essence. We must not look at the form. And we got stronger, the more this anti-colonialism will express itself. Now, anti-colonialism is nothing but anti-capitalism, because colonialism is nothing but an offshoot, an aspect of capitalism. Therefore, if you're anti-colonial, you must be anti-capitalist, if you're logical in your thinking, of course, and your actions. Some people are not, but we are speaking of logical people here. Yes. If you're anti-capitalist, then you must be socialist. Capitalism cannot unite Africa. Africa has to be united by socialism. Now, there's a lot of confusion here on this question of capitalism and socialism. Just recently, a young man said to me, but socialism died. I said, it did? He said, you didn't hear about it? I said, I missed the funeral. Of course, he spoke about the betrayals that occurred in the East. You must not let capitalism confuse your thinking. This is a struggle which Pan-Africanism takes on. We struggle against imperialism in the ideological arena because many people think that capitalism just wants to exploit your labor. It wants to confuse your thinking and make you think just like them. And this is where the real fight occurs. So therefore, this struggle of confusing the thinking, I told the man, I said, you're talking nonsense. Socialism cannot disappear. It cannot die. He said, yes, it can. I said, no. He said, how do you say that? I said, well, you are judging socialism by socialists. You don't do that. He said, I've never heard such nonsense. If you don't judge socialism by socialists, what do you judge it by? I say, you judge it by its principles. Every system is judged by its principles, never its adherents. So he still saw confusion. He said, you're just talking double talk. I said, okay, do you judge Christianity by Christians? So we must not be confused here. Socialism doesn't fall because of betrayal. No system does. The person who betrays themselves goes to the mud, but the system, with its eternal principles, keep marching on. If a system fell because of betrayal, Christianity would have been finished with Judas. At least Judas had the dignity to hang himself. Some of these who betray socialism don't have that dignity. Gorbachev still runs around speaking and picking up 30 pieces of silver everywhere. Yeah. So socialism is an economic system, and there can only be two in the world, capitalism or socialism, because every economic system must answer one fundamental question. Who will own and control the wealth of the country? Who will own and control the means of production? The question can only be answered two ways. Either a few will own or everyone will own. It's as simple as that. And under capitalism, we say, please summarize that we might have. No, I'm going. I thought I had 20 minutes. It's my time. I thought I had 20 minutes. I was going by the clock. How much time do I have left? I'm sorry. Maybe I'm off. That's what I thought I did. I was watching it. No, I'm watching my clock. I'm irresponsible. I'm revolutionary. I go by time. I got my clock right here. Matter of fact, I can say it in 2 words, Black Power. And today we've gone to 1, Pan-Africanism. Yeah. So there are only 2 economic systems, and it's going to be capitalism or socialism. Capitalism is a backward system. There's no need to discuss it. Certainly anyone who's been made a slave by capitalism ought to be hesitant in trying to support the system. But as a conscious African, I must be against capitalism, and I must, of course, seek to destroy it. So when you speak of Pan-Africanism, you must understand you speak of socialism. And we want to underline there's only one socialism out here, and that's scientific socialism, whose principles are abiding and universal. There's no such thing as African socialism, Chinese socialism, Russian socialism, Arab socialism. There's only one socialism. The confusion arises over ideology. That is that which guides you towards your objective. So we're saying clearly here, Pan-Africanism is not an ideology. It is an objective. It is an achievable. Pan-Africanism is the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. All we want is a unified continent with a socialist system. That's all. But you know, Africa is the richest continent in the world. When she's properly organized, she'll be the most powerful. Yeah, of course. Of course. And me, all I want is power. I'm not like others. I don't want money. I don't want popularity. I just want the power I'm supposed to get. That's all. That's all.
Okay. As you can see, that's Brother Kwame Ture speaking on the issue of Pan-Africanism and socialism. What we want to do first and foremost, before we even further, we'd like to maybe explain to you at this point in time how you may proceed for the rest of the day during this program. You know, sometimes they say the best of plans still may go astray. Our intention was to highlight certain organizations and areas of the world that we felt like best fit this concept that we were going to discuss, Pan-Africanism and Socialism. There were invitations that was going out to the proletariat movement, forces in Ghana, West Papua New Guinea, Eritrea, Vietnam, Korea, and Cuba. Even though some had a commitment to be here, others, some issues came up that has prevented them from being able to participate at this time. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try to substitute some of the information that you may would have received by these particular organizations with footage or documentaries that we found that we thought would be good enough to at least expose you to the nature of these particular countries and their history and their culture, given the fact that we are looking at this whole question of the concept of Pan-Africanism and this concept of socialism. So that's what we're going to proceed to do tonight. And for those who don't know me, welcome. My name is Lee Robinson. I'm an organizer for the All African Peoples Representative Party GC. And I'll be the facilitator for tonight. This program is being organized, and this particular African Liberation Month is being organized and co-sponsored by the National Council of Arab Americans, Africa on the Move Blog Talk Radio, which is under the direction of the African Awareness Association, and of course, the party, the All African People Representative Party GC. So let's move forward. When we look at this question and this issue of West Papua New Guinea, which most people know very little about, and this is one reason why we highlighted this particular area. We have a representative come and speak, and they may be here later on. If so, they'll get a chance to talk about their movement and their struggle. But since they're not here, we thought we'd show you this video to talk a little bit about that particular struggle. And I want you to think about what you see and how it may fit in the schemes of things of African people and oppressed people around the world. So this is Brother Herman Wingai. You can tell the story of West Papua struggle. So we want to do the footage on the struggle of West Papua.
It may look like paradise, but for the West Papuan refugees living here in Wewak, Papua New Guinea, life is difficult. If you follow the road next to this refugee camp for just over 200 kilometres, you will reach the border of West Papua and Papua New Guinea. Indigenous West Papuans have been crossing this border illegally since the 1960s, hoping to escape discrimination faced in their homeland. But with no right of residency in Papua New Guinea, life is uncertain and the standard of living remains extremely low. For Dan Waromi and his family, their life depends on the small income earned from catching and selling fish.
Mi stop work mi work as fisherman. Mi stop that's all. Mi pinimo se mi stop lompla time na work mi as fisherman na mi pilih hatru long mi painim money long mi pay school fee belong all pikinini belong mi work lo fisherman taso mi go pool cano I go finding fish that's all na morning mi go out long only in 7 o'clock 8 o'clock abinun I know semi stop I go abinun mi kam salin lig money am long mi buy kai that's all na stop mi no kisim big pla money am lig that's all na mi stop look out me one time all family na mi play stop.
Mi plakam long Papua New Guinea one time papa mama mika one time all mi stop likiet mi plakam long 1979 mi plus stop lo wanimo mi plus stop 3 years na bien online lo mission kisi mi plakam long we work and now mi plus stop 27 years lo we work now The same na man blomi of the times I go fishing la Solvara, na mi plus I living la disla. Mi eri mi help me and basalim fish, na lukati mol pikinini la baim school fee blang all refugees mama. Same life mi ata sol, aw mi plus tab na mi plus strong na mi plus tab. Mi plus kam lo Papua New Guinea no long, paini mama mas mi plus like kam lo fight lo freedom lo mi plus. Sino mi plus mas kam stab na. Safa na helping all people lo mi plus upside.
The West Papuan community in Wewak have opened their doors to 30 West Papuan student activists who have illegally crossed the border by boat to attend a non-violent training workshop.
Oli kam mi plaku cooking kai long all. Sevi mol ina poligo beke mi pla fight ina plong. Mi pla ina block si independence lo mi pla.
Though the boat journey is risky, the students are eager to meet with West Papua human rights advocate and political advisor Herman Wangai.
Happy day.
The student activists, including Marcus Yeno, have not seen Herman for 5 years.
Ya, saya menyanyi lagu ini, saya mengenangkan kisah perjalanan panjang ketika saya bergabung di dalam revolusi ini, bertemu dengan kakak saudara tercinta, kakak Herman Wangai. Saya bisa dapat bertemu dengan dia seperti ini sesuatu yang sangat luar biasa. Karena dengan lagu ini, walaupun dia jauh, saya jauh dengan semua teman-teman dari negeri yang jauh, baik Papua sampai ke Australia. Tapi dengan lagu ini saya rasa dekat sekali, bisa bertemu dengan dia. Tapi hari ini saya merasa bangga, berterima kasih, saya bisa bertemu dan duduk bersama-sama dengan dia untuk bisa menyanyi lagu. Karena revolusi membuat kita harus berpisah. Kita harus berpisah, bukan berpisah untuk pergi untuk selamanya, tapi berpisah untuk kembali. Dan lagu ini pas menceritakan bagaimana kasih Tuhan.
Dan juga hal yang berikut adalah bahwa pengertian lagu ini bahwa macam kakak Herman jauh daripada orang tua. Dan kalau adik-adik dengan kakak kita orang jauh daripada tanah air seperti sekarang kakak Herman ada di Australia. Saya tidak bisa melihat orang tua saya, bapak dan mama.
Just days before the students left West Papua for the workshop, they organised a peaceful demonstration in the capital city, Jayapura.
Kami sebagai masyarakat Papua, sebagai pemuda dan mahasiswa, sangat menyayangkan tindakan aparat polisi Indonesia yang tidak menghargai kami sebagai pemuda dan mahasiswa, sebagai orang Papua pemilik tanah, dan tidak memberikan ruang demokrasi bagi kami. Ketika kami melakukan aksi demonstrasi damai atau aksi damai yang melibatkan seluruh segenap rakyat Papua, aparat atau polisi Indonesia datang dan membubarkan kami, melakukan penembakan untuk membuat kami trauma dan kami lari. Itu kebiasaan. Kebiasaan mereka melakukan itu untuk bagaimana membuat kami trauma. Masyarakat pada situ trauma dan lari, dan ketika kita lari dan mereka kejar dan tangkap. Itu yang terjadi.
With no media access allowed in West Papua and little attention being given to the conditions in these refugee camps, the West Papuans only hope their struggle will not be forgotten.
Well, there was a piece on West Papua New Guinea. One of the things, just looking at that particular piece, that you see a lot of commonality of these various countries where you find African people. They function under very similar conditions, and the question becomes, what will be the best means of changing these conditions? And as you can see that this question of the role of students and youth, they have a role. The workers have a role, but more importantly, they are fighting for something that all human beings are fighting for, the right to be free and self-sufficient and self-determined. So just keep that in mind as you go to these various countries and movements. And we will have this discussion in context of Pan-Africanism and Socialism. The next piece we're going to take is we're going to go to Eritrea and just show you a cultural aspects of some of the history of our people in Eritrea. And you can look at that and look at maybe some of the commonalities of us as African people, no matter where we are. Culture is a very important tool that must be used and understood. So we can go to this piece as it show you expression of a revolution song in Eritrea by our people.
يروح عريسة تاريخه زقرب يرقى نخلت عرب وصلنا التحلي أدل الخراخبة كوتما نقوله مسكين دعت تغبى وسحي مريت نفرت زمر وسحي مريت نفرت زمر ورار السمخات وديتنا يبلستي مسكتي بسراويت عطورة مستانكي عمشي شو در عمان ونحام غشتي عمشي شو در عمان ونحام غشتي الزمون وناتوار استفار مرت كنت زم الشبار كنت هاي الأخوات ملسنا يزخون موس مدكلا وأمنت ملسنا يزخون موس مدكلا مداتنا علم جنازة يمسكروا بخلاش تانكي كم مرخ وندرو يرقى نخلي نقعد زحابر يرقى نخلي ساليلو وانكدل تانكنيا كحنق صوت هرق ممازي خلاش نتسنق جابتو مرخة طارق زدنق جابتو مرخة طارق زدنق وراري سمهار وديتنا يبلستي وسكتي بسراويت عجوارة مستنكي عمشي شو در عمان ونحام غشتي عمشي شو در عمان ونحام غشتي الزمون وناتوار استفار ورت كنت زم الشبار كنت هاي بلقولت ملسنا يزغلوس وتكلا وأمنت ملسنا يزغلوس وتكلا عساتاتنا يبحري اشتاقوا أخبروا سألنا سراويتنا زماجة تدرروا زي ساعة تاريخي وقرقصوا تغيروا زي ساعة تاريخي وقرقصوا تغيروا وديتنا يسألاني وقاخي قوتري نقصنا يدرقي معان يحرر ناوتو مسلسو عزونا نتره ناوتو مسلسو عزونا نتره وراني سمهار وديتنا يبلستي مسكتي بسراوي حمششو درعمن ونعم وشتي مزقودنا توار استفان مرت كنت زي بشفار كنت عايز بلكونت ورسنا عايز خلوص ما تكلا وأمنت
Okay, we apologize for not being able to see the video itself, but did get a sense of listening to what the music would sound like. As you know, when you talk about African culture, it's very diverse. What we want to do right now, we're going to look at this history of Africans in Venezuela. You know, there's a lot going on today in the country of Venezuela, and Venezuela have a large Afro-Venezuelan population. And part of inviting forces from the region to come here tonight was to share with you some of that history of the Afro-Venezuelan. So since they couldn't be here tonight, we have chosen this piece. I think the next two pieces coming up on this whole struggle of Africans and culture of Venezuela. So we're going to the African diaspora in Venezuela.
Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the African diaspora in Venezuela.
Freedom is
In the 2011 national census, less than 4% of Venezuelans self-identified as Afro-Venezuelan, putting the population at just over 1 million. However, other sources estimate that at least 3 million Venezuelans have African ancestry. The largest Afro-Venezuelan population can be found in the region of Barlovento, 100 kilometers to the east of the capital, Caracas. There are also Afro-Venezuelan communities along the coast of Carabobo, the Distrito Federal, Aragua, and the southeastern shore of Lake Maracaibo.
Enslaved Africans began arriving in Venezuela in significant numbers in the 1500s, as the Spanish monarchy began to expand its empire across Latin America.
In total, approximately 100,000 enslaved Africans were brought to Venezuela. They were referred to as pieza de India and treated as products rather than people. During the 16th century, enslaved Africans worked in the gold mines in Coro and Yaracuy and did fishing and pearl diving in Isla Margarita and Cumaná. In the 18th century, they were brought to Barlovento to assist the cacao industry, as well as on sugar plantations in Lara, Aragua, Zulia, and Lake Maracaibo. Slave rebellions in Venezuela were recorded from as early as the 1530s. However, the biggest revolt in Venezuela took place in 1552, led by the Puerto Rican-born Miguel de Boria, also known as El Negro Miguel, who formed a settlement of runaway slaves known as a cimarrón or a cumbe. He reigned with his wife, Guiomar, whom he declared queen, and his son as prince, until their kingdom was attacked and reclaimed by Spanish forces.
One of the most famous black uprisings in Venezuela took place in 1795 in Coro, led by the freeman José Leonardo Chirino.
The rebellion was suppressed. Chirino was executed and his children sold into slavery. However, Chirino has gone down in Venezuelan folklore as a symbol of slave resistance. Nowadays, there is an airport named after him, and the annual celebration of Afro-Venezuelan Day is celebrated on May the 10th to commemorate the date his insurrection began.
By the 18th century, there were 20 to 30,000 runaway slaves in Venezuela and approximately 60,000 working in plantations. Afro-Venezuelans played an important role in Venezuela's fight for independence.
If you haven't heard of him, Simón Bolívar was a revolutionary leader who is hailed with liberating 5 South American countries from Spanish colonial rule: Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Bolivia, and Venezuela.
Recognizing the military value of the enslaved workforce, Simón Bolívar declared the abolition of slavery, first in 1812 and then again in 1816. However, slavery was not abolished in practice in Venezuela until 1854.
The most famous Afro-Venezuelan independence fighter was Pedro Camejo, also known as El Negro Primero, or in English, the black man who goes first, because he was reportedly always the first to ride into battle. He was famously killed in action in 1821 in the Second Battle of Carabobo, which eventually led to Venezuela's independence. Today, Pedro Camejo is a national symbol of bravery and resistance, and there is a statue of him in Plaza Carabobo in the Venezuelan capital, Caracas. In 1821, the law of the womb was passed, stating that all children born to slaves would be born free. Slavery was officially abolished in Venezuela in 1854 under the Venezuelan president, General José Gregorio Monagas.
Even though slavery has been abolished in Venezuela for almost 200 years, racist attitudes continue to hold back the Afro-Venezuelan population.
Black intellectuals that countered this trend include Juan Pablo Sojo and Manuel Rodríguez Cárdenas, who went to great lengths to study, document, and celebrate Afro-Venezuelan history and culture. In 2004, former President Hugo Chavez created the Presidential Commission Against Racial Discrimination. The following year, Afro-Venezuelan activists proposed celebrating the 10th of May as Afro-Venezuelan Day to coincide with the African insurrection led by the black free man José Leonardo Chirino. Afro-Venezuelan Day is celebrated every May 10th across the country with music and dance performances by the Afro-Venezuelan community. In 2012, the National Council for the Development of Afro-Descendant Communities in Venezuela was formed, also known as CONADECAFRO. The institution works to advocate political, economic, and social rights for black Venezuelans, and they were involved in passing the Law Against Racial Discrimination in Venezuela.
There are clear African influences still present in Venezuelan culture today.
Most Afro-Venezuelans are Roman Catholic by faith, and one of the most important Catholic festivals for the Afro-Venezuelan community is the Festival of San Bautista, celebrated on June the 24th. Following the Cuban Revolution in 1959, the influx of Cuban migrants to Venezuela introduced the African-derived belief system Santeria to Venezuela and is practiced to this day. Another tradition that speaks to Venezuela's African heritage is the Dancing Devils of Corpus Christi, a religious festival which celebrates the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. It's celebrated across the country by 11 different sects or brotherhoods, of which the most famous are the Dancing Devils of Yare and the Dancing Devils of Chuao. It's traditional for all these sects to dress up in devil costumes and dance, and in doing so pledge their devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. An important feature of Afro-Venezuelan music is the drums, a tradition brought to Venezuela by enslaved Africans. In Barlovento, the quitiplas are widely used. They are a percussive instrument made from bamboo sticks. Along the central coastal region of Venezuela, the tambor style of music and dance is popular. As well as being the name of the genre, tambor also literally means drums in Spanish. Famous Afro-Venezuelans include the salsa singer and legend Oscar de Leon, supermodel Inez Stevens, opera singer Morea Muñoz, Magdalena Sanchez, the queen of Venezuelan song, singer and rapper Micro TDH, rapper a cappella, and Aristóbulo Isturiz, who became vice president of the Constituent Assembly of Venezuela in 2017.
That brings us to the end of our video on the African diaspora in Venezuela. For more great content on black communities worldwide, be sure to have a look at the other videos on my channel. And for a daily dose of black history, follow me on Instagram at FreedomIsMineOfficial. I'll see you in the next video.
Freedom is
Ser afrodescendiente es equivalente a ser del barrio, a ser del pueblo. y ser del barrio y ser del pueblo, hoy está plenamente reconocido en lo que es la estructura legal y jurídica que nosotros mismos nos hemos dado.
¿Su mamá es de descendencia indígena? ¿Porque desciende de dónde? Nosotros no podemos dejar en este momento al presidente Maduro solo para que él resuelva los problemas del país. No, el llamado del Congreso de la Patria es para que todos y todas, ¿verdad?, en conjunto armemos un verdadero plan que venga desde nuestras raíces, desde nuestro quehacer, desde lo que somos como pueblo venezolano, y presentarlo, ¿verdad?, para avanzar en lo económico, en lo social y en lo político.
Okay, now we can go for Venezuela, go to Vietnam. We were scheduled to have our sister Luna, who will speak on Vietnam and the issue of the struggle to maintain socialism. So since she's not here at this point in time, we're going to share a footage of a video where she talk about this whole struggle of imperialism attempt to do real socialism in Vietnam. So this is what we're going to be watching now.
In the 80s, China, Western countries, and ASEAN countries took that as an excuse to isolate, blockade, and set a comprehensive embargo on Vietnam. And if that wasn't enough, as soon as we finished our fight with Pol Pot in the late 80s and early 90s, the USSR was collapsing. Our one true friend now could not help us anymore. They could not even help themselves. So we had to find our own way to survive while the USA and the rest of the world put severe pressure on us. That was why we implemented the Doi My reforms. The Doi My reforms were a series of reforms that took place in the early 90s in Vietnam. According to the Vietnam Communist Party, Doi My reforms are defined as the transition from a subsidized, centralized planned economy into a multi-element commodity economy. It follows market mechanisms under the management of the government, and it is socialist-oriented. Why did we do this? Was it because we suddenly realized that capitalism is superior to communism? No, the reasons are complicated and include external pressures and internal struggles going all the way back to our wars with France, Japan, and the USA. We had defeated the capitalists in military war, but they kept fighting us with financial warfare, and without any allies, it was too much for us to overcome. In addition to supporting Pol Pot against us, the USA also enforced massive embargoes on us. And of course, the capitalist institutions of the world also contributed to this war against Vietnamese socialism. Financial and economic institutions like the World They are imperialistic institutions that force capitalism on independent nations. They do this by offering loans and financial support to developing nations, but only on the condition that they deregulate markets and let more capitalism enter our borders. Here is a chart from the World Bank as some of the requirements that the World Bank makes. Dismantle collective agriculture in favor of system with individual families as a basic unit. Liberalize domestic rights trade. Remove virtually all administered prices. Reduce size of civil service. Eliminated many trade barriers, including most import quotas. Shifts the decision about foreign trade from state to enterprise level. Allowed increasing numbers of enterprises to engage directly in the international trade. So the World Bank forced the Vietnam government to give more power to capitalist companies and specifically foreign-owned companies. In other words, they wanted to increase the power of rich countries to imperialize Vietnam. And if Vietnam refused, they would not get any economic help at all. Vietnam had to do what the World Bank told us to do because we were in a desperate situation. Of course, it's not just the World Bank. Look at what IMF, the International Monetary Fund, asked us to do before they would lend our nation any money. Going forward, to reap the full benefits from Vietnam's increasing economic and financial integration, the government will need to continue to invest in essential public infrastructure, especially in sectors in which there is little scope for commercially viable private investment. They said that we have to invest in public infrastructure. This sounds good, right? Of course, it's good for any country to invest in public infrastructure, but then they sneak this in immediately. At the same time, remaining regulatory constraints that may hamper investment in projects that could be of interest to domestic or foreign private investors need to be removed. You see, capitalism doesn't give anything to anyone for free. Everything comes at a price, and wealthy imperialist nations always get the better deal. But I'm not finished yet. IMF also required Vietnam to spend less money on our own citizens' well-being, minimizing the total amount of government spending, minimizing government spending on subsidies, minimizing the government's wage bill, minimizing civil service pensions and social security spending. Wealthy capitalist institutions demand developing nations to severely neglect our own people in exchange for receiving desperately needed finances. And remember, these are loans that must be paid back with interest. This isn't charity, it's financial warfare. It's a form of violence. Many people died around the world because of these enforced austerity measures and these predatory loans. In 2007, we became a member of WTO, the World Trade Organization. Sounds like progress, huh? But actually, this was what we had to do as a member. We had to lower the import tax, even down to 0% for many essential products such as machines, cars, motorbikes, alcoholic drinks, meat, medicines, and so on. Maybe for the first 5 seconds when you read this, you might think it's a good thing because the imported products would be cheaper and consumer can have more choices. Free market. Awesome, right? But no, it's not. For example, lower the import taxes on cars will make the price cheaper and lots of people will buy cars. But actually, our infrastructure is still not advanced enough for that many cars. Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City street plans were designed for only a few thousand cars, not millions. Our government had very high luxury taxes on cars because they were trying to keep cars imported at a pace that infrastructure improvement could handle. Having more cars when we don't have the proper infrastructure causes major traffic jams, and that's exactly what's happening in many big cities in Vietnam, especially Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Remember, Vietnam has always had good public transportation. We are also a motorbike culture, and many of our roads are designed specifically for motorbikes. They just aren't wide enough for thousands of cars to be clogging them up. Of course, it would be nice to improve that infrastructure, but that takes time and money. Vietnam's government was using luxury tax on car imports to fund that infrastructure improvement, but now we don't have that option and it's much more difficult to manage. Lowering import taxes also encourages people to import more, and this leads to trade deficit. This means our economy will have to depend on other countries. This is a key component of imperialism, forcing us to export our goods to the rest of the world as cheaply as possible while increasing our dependence on rich developed capitalist countries. Capitalists call this competition, but they fail to mention that the competition is always reached in their favor. So by the early 90s, we began to realize that we just could not have our perfect communist society in the situation we were forced into. Our infrastructure never recovered from the devastating wars against France, Japan, and the USA, and Cambodia, and even the invasion from China in 1979. We were in a desperate situation, and we were all on our own. We just didn't have the resources to build the society we wanted to live in. But we still didn't want to live in a capitalist society. The Doi-Ma reforms were seen as the only choice we had left to resist capitalism. We had to move to a system that combines socialist principles with capitalist reforms. we had to let some elements of capitalism in to survive and to get the rest of the world to trade with us. But we still didn't give up on our true target, communism. So anyway, that's why we had the Doi-me reforms. It wasn't because we loved capitalism. It was because if we didn't do at least some of what capitalist nations were forcing us to do, we would have been destroyed. So it's totally understandable that now many of you see Vietnam as a mixture of socialism, communism, and capitalism. And Lenin foresaw this situation and he mentioned it in some of his books. According to Lenin, in order to gain that target, we had to pass through a transitional period, which he called socialism. Our Doi-me reforms were based on the Lenin's new economic policy, also called NEP. I put the link in the description if you want to know more about this. So again, we had to let capitalism in so we could survive. And according to the Vietnam Communist Party, we are now in a transitional period toward communism, and we call this transitional period socialism. That's why Vietnam is called the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. But it's not just some name we call ourselves. We are working hard to make our society more socialistic all the time. And our government is officially committed to strive toward communism. The official ideology of Vietnam is still Marxist-Leninism and Ho Chi Minh thought. But what does that mean exactly? Well, the government of Vietnam has 8 official directions for our society. The Communist Party believes that moving in these directions will lead us toward communism. 1. To have a modern economy with educated people, protection of our natural resources, and protection of our environment. 2. Develop a socialism-oriented market economy. 3. Build a Vietnamese culture that keeps our good traditions and enhances the life of the people and promotes social justice. 4. To assure public security, national security, and public order. 5. To deal with foreign countries peacefully, democratically, and cooperatively. 6. To build democratic socialism with national unity. 7. To build a lawful socialist government that exists for and belongs to the people in accordance with Marxist principles. 8. To build a pure and strong Communist Party. We are building the infrastructure for this, and unfortunately, because we are a developing country, it will take more time to build these things. Our goal is to have all of these goals fulfilled by 2050, and then we will begin trying to transition fully towards a stateless, classless communist society. As evidence that we are striving for a more socialist society, here are some socialistic programs that work well in Vietnam. We have effective price stabilization programs on food and other material needs. Check my videos for more details. We have affordable healthcare and education systems. We have nearly 25,000 worker-owned cooperatives all over Vietnam, including agricultural cooperatives, transportation cooperatives, and small-scale industry cooperatives. About 50% of farms in Vietnam are collectively owned, with over 6 million members of cooperative farms. Government now owns nearly 700 companies in essential fields such as internet, electricity, water, gasoline, road construction, and so on. That's why the internet, water, electricity, and gasoline are pretty cheap here. There are a lot of benefits if you join a cooperative, and the government has been encouraging more and more people to join and start cooperatives. For example, if you want to open an individual-owned transportation company, it is very difficult for you to ask for a business license, and also there are many other kinds of paperwork. It is very complicated, but if you join a transportation cooperative, you will get help with all of this. The government will help you deal with paperwork, help you manage your finances, give you advice about your business, and so on. Actually, it is a way for our government to encourage people to join the cooperative by making the paperwork easier for cooperative members. Another example, my mom is a farmer. She also joined a cooperative in her village. So, anytime there has been a dangerous rice disease, she gets informed and advised about the right pesticide to deal with it. And if she doesn't have enough money to buy fertilizer or rice for the next crop, she can always go to the cooperative and ask for help. And by joining the cooperative, she also benefits from the rice price stabilization program. It helps farmers and consumers in Vietnam. Again, if you want to know how this program protects farmers, check the video I made about it. Earlier in this video, I mentioned how Ho Chi Minh believed that the most important thing about creating a socialist society was having socialist people to build the society. Well, even today, Vietnam is working hard to develop socialist values in our society. Every school in Vietnam teaches Marxism, Leninism, and Ho Chi Minh thought. Primary schools, high schools, even my business university all require instruction on socialist theory and philosophy. I studied socialist theory from the time I was 6 years old until I graduated from college. Socialist instruction starts with meaningful stories for kids, then develops into more formal Marxist, Leninist, Ho Chi Minh ideology coursework in universities and colleges. These are considered essential classes, and students have to pass if they want to graduate. So every single Vietnamese person is officially trained in Marxism, Leninism, and Ho Chi Minh thought as a student. So it shouldn't surprise you that our Vietnam National Assembly brings up Marx, Lenin, and Ho Chi Minh and the USSR in nearly every meeting.
Là cái sự đổ vỡ của Đông Âu và Liên bang Xô Viết, cái nguyên nhân trực tiếp và nguyên nhân chính ấy, là cái việc chúng ta là chậm phát hiện được sai lầm và họ chậm sửa chữa sai lầm, và cái chính là những người đứng đầu ấy là đã xa rời chủ nghĩa Mác Lênin, sau đó xa rời nguyên lý của chủ nghĩa Mác Lênin.
Yes, we do have a few liberal leaders who worship capitalism, but most of us are still very Marxist and Leninist. If you want to learn more about that, I have a couple of videos on our National Assembly. I will link them in the description. For Vietnamese people, socialistic values are an essential part of who we are.
We got one other feature we want to show. This one is out of Korea, and they're dealing with the same issue of looking at the importance of socialism in competition and struggling against capitalism domination. We're going to take that piece. This is from Brother Keith Bennett, who's also invited to be here tonight. He would do a analysis of a reality of what's going on in the country of Korea.
Our first speaker will be Keith Bennett. Keith is an active member of the International Manifesto Group, co-editor of the Friends of Socialist China website, and a consultant specializing in Chinese and Korean affairs. He is the deputy chair of the Kim Il-sung Kim Jong-il Foundation, the KKF, and the Deputy General Secretary of the European Regional Society for the Study of the Juche Idea. He has closely followed events in Korea and the Korean road to socialism for nearly half a century, and first visited the DPRK in 1983 as a delegate of the delegate to the World Conference of Journalists Against Imperialism. He has subsequently visited the country on some 50 occasions and was twice awarded the DPRK Order of Friendship by President Kim Il-sung. He has delivered papers on the Juche idea and on Korean reunification at conferences in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So Keith, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Radhika. And first, I'd like to thank the International Manifesto Group, not simply for organizing this meeting, but for having the political courage to do so. Back in 1998, the scholars Bruce Cummings, who Radhika mentioned a moment ago, and John Halliday produced a rather good 6-part TV documentary and an accompanying book entitled Korea, the Unknown War. At least so far as the West is concerned, that title remains highly apposite. This notwithstanding more than 33,000 American deaths in the 1950 to 53 war, more than 1,000 British, more than 500 Canadian. And of course, that's before we think of the far greater Korean and Chinese casualties and the destruction of the whole country. American planes dropped 635,000 tons of bombs on Korea. that is essentially on North Korea, including 32,557 tons of napalm, compared to 503,000 tons of bombs dropped in the entire Pacific theater of World War II. The number of Korean dead, injured, or missing by war's end approached 3 million, 10% of the overall population at the time. And again, as Radhika has mentioned, that war has not ended. The armistice agreement signed on July the 27th, 1953, has yet to be replaced by a peace treaty or any formal declaration of an end to the conflict. US troops in their tens of thousands remain in occupation of the south of Korea. Having threatened the use of nuclear weapons at least twice in the conflict and on many subsequent occasions, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea remains on the United States nuclear first strike list. However, whilst Korea is rarely out of the international headlines, this is almost invariably in a way that seeks to present the DPRK in a negative light, as a supposed economic failure, violator of human rights, or threat to peace. Sadly, too much of the left, at least in the global north, joins in this anti-communist and indeed at times racist chorus. Having visited the country some 50 times in the last 38 years, I feel quite confident in stating that nearly everything you have ever read in the Western press about the DPRK is at least partly untrue. The left's ignoring or belittling of the DPRK is all the more striking when one considers that the Workers' Party of Korea has now been in power for longer than any other communist or workers' party in history. From 1945, predating the founding of the People's Republic of China and surpassing the Soviet state's lifespan of 1917 to 1991. From this alone, you might expect to think that they must have got at least something right, that there is something here worth looking at and even learning from. Moreover, the WPK's journey from 1945 to the cusp of 2022 has not been plain sailing for even a moment. Aside from the terrible destruction of war in 1950 to 53, the country has lived under uninterrupted US sanctions since 1945. Nor is this all. Since 2006, the United Nations Security Council has passed nearly a dozen resolutions steadily tightening sanctions on this country of less than 26 million people. Japan, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and others all have additional unilateral sanctions. That's before we come to the questions of US military occupation and threats of nuclear annihilation that have been made continuously over 7 decades. Despite this, the DPRK, to take but 2 examples, has completely free medical care and completely free education with universal compulsory 11-year education. It can creditably claim to be one of a tiny handful of countries, perhaps now the only country, not to record a single case of COVID-19. One has to ask what the country might have achieved had it been left to develop in peace. These are some of the reasons why the myopia that inflicts much of the left in the Western world with regard to the DPRK is in the main not replicated in the rest of the world. In the imperialist heartlands, there is some knowledge that the Chinese People's Volunteers fought in the Korean War, but far fewer people know that in the period of 1946 to 49, the Korean Communist leader Kim Il-sung sent tens of thousands of battle-hardened troops to assist the Communist Party of China in the liberation of Northeast China. That Kim Il-sung began his revolutionary career as a teenager in China and became a cadre in the Communist Party of China. That later, based in the Soviet Union, he became a commander of the international allied forces that united the Soviet Red Army, Chinese and Korean communists, and other Chinese patriots in a single fighting force to resist Japanese militarist aggression. That Japanese military reports cited his skill and prowess as a guerrilla fighter. If you visit the revolutionary museums in Pyongyang, and I hope those of you who have not visited the DPRK yet will do so once such travel becomes possible again post-COVID, You will not only be able to see all this, but also learn about the Korean pilots who fought against the American aggressors in the skies above Vietnam, and those who served in the Egyptian Air Force during the October 1973 Middle East War. Revolutionaries in Latin America and the Caribbean know that at the time of the 1962 Cuban Caribbean missile crisis, while some others were working out how to evacuate their nationals, the orders that the DPRK experts received from their government were to remain at their posts and in the event of an American invasion, to fight shoulder to shoulder with their Cuban comrades in arms. Latin American and Caribbean comrades know that Kim Il-sung's close friends and comrades have included Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, Che Guevara, Salvador Allende, Morris Bishop, and Daniel Ortega. Revolutionaries in Africa and West Asia know well of the DPRK's active political and military, moral and material assistance over successive decades to the national liberation struggles in Algeria, Palestine, Western Sahara, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, as well as to the defense of Syria, Iran, and numerous independent African states. To this day, like their counterparts from other socialist countries like China and Cuba and Vietnam, Korean doctors and agricultural experts continue to serve the local people in a number of African countries. The DPRK has even extended its practical support to anti-imperialist and socialist struggles in Europe, from the struggles against the fascist regimes in Greece, Spain, and Portugal, to Malta's struggle to defend its non-aligned independence under Labour governments starting with Don Mintoff, through to its clear-cut support for the Irish people's struggle to end partition and to achieve national reunification and full independence. As Kim Il-sung put it in a 1984 speech, both the Korean people and the Irish people share a bitter past when they were oppressed and maltreated under the colonial rule of the imperialists, and they are still suffering today due to the policy of occupation pursued by outside forces. In a word, outside of the imperialist heartlands, the DPRK is rightly seen as an integral, respected, and essential contingent of the world revolutionary forces, one that has, like Cuba, contributed to the struggle for human liberation out of all proportion to its small size and objective circumstances. In fact, for this reason, the historically most advanced revolutionary forces in the imperialist heartlands do have a tradition of standing alongside the DPRK and the Korean people. In the United States, the Black Panther Party repeatedly featured Kim Il-sung and the Korean struggle on the front page of its newspaper, promoted the study of the Juche idea, Korea's revolutionary ideology, and sent its delegations to Pyongyang. As a not sympathetic article by a US academic put it in 2019, from its militancy to the regime's championing of women's rights, North Korean communism appeared ahead of its time and transferable to Black America. Eldridge Cleaver's sudden embrace of North Korean ideology resulted in him bringing his wife Kathleen Cleaver to Pyongyang in the summer of 1970. Kathleen felt that the anti-Americanism of both the Panthers and the North Korean regime resulted in a natural alliance between the two. In her unpublished memoir, she wrote, the North Koreans' official denunciations of the United States imperialists matched the most virulent sentiments Black slaves and their descendants felt, making it easy for Black Panthers to identify with the fervor of their ideological antagonism. During her brief time in North Korea, Kathleen Cleaver gave birth to a baby girl in the Pyongyang maternity hospital. With the help of their North Korean hosts, the Cleavers named their daughter Jo Ju-yong-hui, which means a young heroine born in Juche, Korea. Cleaver also admired the free medical care that she received during her pregnancy in North Korea. The cleanliness and collectivism of Pyongyang appeared totally at odds with the impoverished inner cities of the United States in the late 1960s. Panther member Byron Booth, who accompanied Cleaver to Pyongyang in 1969, said in an October 25th, 1969 Black Panther newspaper article, "Being here in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is like catching glimpses of the future. Meanwhile, fellow Panther Assata Shakur recalled in her autobiography that she preferred reading the works of Kim Il-sung over theoretical texts from Marx and Lenin, end of quote. Our range of expert speakers today will shed light on different aspects of Korea's long struggle for independence, peace, reunification, and socialism, why it is worthy of study, and why it is deserving of support. Thank you very much.
Okay, there was Brother Keith Bennett talking about conditions in Korea, and what we're going to do right now, we're going to bring in Brother Anthony Williams, and he's going to share some solidarity statements that has been delivered to us as the particular organizations and movements are sending their solidarity support African Liberation Day, Palestine Day for 2022. Brother Anthony, will you share some solidarity statements with the rest of the listening world?
Sure. I'll start by sharing a solidarity statement from the National Council of Arab Americans, prepared by Jafar Jafari. Dear brothers, sisters, and comrades, our joint dedication to freeing our peoples from imperialism, colonialism, and Zionism is an ongoing struggle against the common enemy. Our aggregate struggle witnessed many accomplishments and victories, and some severe setbacks, highlighted by assassinating our leaders in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Yet the struggle continues due to renewed dedication of new generations of determined people to carry forward the torch of freedom to the end. It is crucially important to carry out the armed struggle to realize the broader objectives of defeating colonialism and Zionism, but more importantly is to be dedicated to a just cause, worthy of sacrifices. Our revered Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso warned African leaders to challenge the Western debt, choking the continent's stability and independence. In a speech to the African Unity meeting in Addis Ababa in 1986, he called for cancellation of our foreign debt and say our debt will not be paid. Ignoring his revolutionary vision, African countries consequently surrendered their autonomy to the European colonialists, increasing their debt size and denying the new generations decent living standards. Sankara was universally acknowledged to be incorruptible, a trait found in Africa's giants, Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and many others. They, in the aggregate, were not known for empty rhetoric and cliches. Rather, they were committed to acting and directly confronting Western imperialism, driven by a resolute commitment to justice. Our generation owes a tremendous debt to those leaders before us, determined to build alternative future free from colonial oppression. Since Sankara's murder in October 1987, social advances and progressive changes he initiated were revolt, and by 2014, Burkina Faso was considered one of the poorest countries in the world. Sankara's legacy endured all these years, however. On this occasion of Africa Liberation Day and Palestine Solidarity Day, we salute our heroes and comrades who fought against colonialism and Zionism, both ills challenging our collective aspiration to freedom and independent development. In Palestine, a faulty leadership vision of accommodation with the enemy has led to more lands being expropriated, more people jailed by the Zionists, and loss of hope, only temporarily. The enemy's dedication to its goal of cleansing the land of its rightful owners has produced a negative effect, leading to more popular engagement and the will to fight, as evidenced in the daily confrontations encompassing wider sectors of society. This is certainly a bright development and a fundamental addition to the global struggle against oppression, colonialism, and Zionism. The legacy of our murdered leaders continues to guide the current path of struggle until our goals of freedom and independence are achieved.
Thank you, Brother Anthony. Right now, we're going to go to our topics, which we're going to talk about the concept of Pan-Africanism and socialism in the 21st century, but the emphasis is on Pan-Africanism. We're going to bring Brother Bambushi Shango, who is an organizer for the All-African People APRP-GC. He will speak to us on the question of Pan-Africanism. Brother Bambushi.
Honored to be a part of your program tonight, and I would like to start basically by addressing this question of socialism, and specifically scientific socialism, because it is one of the tenets of our organization. And in league with our ideology, we believe that anyone who's talking about Pan-Africanism and not talking about socialism is not really talking about Pan-Africanism. Kwame Ture used to say that when you look at the predecessors of socialism, you see communalism, a system in which the primary focus of those societies are the benefits of the people in those societies. He said, when you look at capitalism, the predecessors, the direct predecessor of capitalism is slavery. It should not be difficult for us to understand which side we should be on. And here we want to try to make some distinctions, because I am grateful for the videos that you showed, the videos on Vietnam and on North Korea. They were very informative and instructive. And as such, we begin to see some patterns. We begin to see how socialism is applicable and how it is created, how it's brought about, and how it develops, and how it will really assist the African Revolution. And again, we want to emphasize that socialism is the only way to Pan-Africanism. A United States of Africa without socialism is just plain neocolonialism. There were some examples that were given by both the sister from Vietnam and the solidarity worker with North Korea. They talked about at least two aspects of how socialism affects and inform a society. And I would add to that that we can also see these examples in what was being built in Guinea. 1 second, please. Look at the attempt to build socialism in Ghana under Kwame Nkrumah, and to build socialism in Guinea under Sékou Touré, and to build socialism in the liberation movements in Guinea-Bissau, in Mozambique, in Angola, in Namibia. You begin to see this pattern of one, free education and complete education. And you also begin to see this pattern of free healthcare, which for people in Cuba, they see that as an investment in their society. It's what they call human capital. And again, I'd like to draw your attention to Cuba because we know that one very well. In the Cuban Revolution, 1958, it was decided that the revolution would be for the people of Cuba, and specifically the youth, the children of Cuba. And because of that, if you look at the Cuban Revolution through the years that they have been waged and continued, you will notice that emphasis is always placed on health and education. Today, Cuba has 5 vaccines against the COVID-19. The only country in the quote unquote third world, the only country in the underdeveloped world, sitting there blockaded by sanctions from the United States, and they have developed 4 COVID vaccines. And their society today is a society that is almost COVID free. So why is it then that socialism thinks that there should be emphasis on education and health? Well, it's very simple. To have a society that is unhealthy means that you're having a society with all kinds of problems, a society that is dying. To have a society that is uneducated, you have the perfect example of the United States. It's a society where correct decisions cannot be made because people have no information to make these decisions. And not only do they not have this information, but educationally, they have not been trained on how to go and find it, how to get it. So here again, you see the rationale for having an educated society, and for having a society that puts the people of that society first, make the people of that society primary. So based on those 2 primary things, there are others. For example, on the socialism, you will note that there's always an attempt to reduce poverty. On the socialism, there is a great production and work in the process of creating equality. There is, of course, always the benefit of social ownership, not just the social ownership of production, but the social ownership of distinct portions of society. And, strangely enough, you have socialism in capitalism. How is that possible? I'll give you two examples. Your fire department and your police department. Do you pay as an individual for your police services or your fire department services? Or do the society pay as a whole? Therefore, if you have no money, does it mean that your fire department will let your house burn? Or is it beneficial for the overall society to ensure that your house don't burn down? And therefore, they have socialized those two aspects of capitalism. We always say, well, ain't no socialism on the capitalism, but those two are. On the socialism, there's a great emphasis on protection of the environment. And this emphasis is based on the fact that on the socialism, you have a productive society that cares about the overall planning for the future. On the capitalism, you have very little planning, and so the whole process is basically to figure out how to make as much money as possible. If it means taking down all the trees in the Amazon, at least you will be rich. You might not have another generation, but emphasis on environmental issues, global warming, etc. On the socialism, you have, for the most part, the absence of exploitation, and you usually have a guaranteed job. So we want to use these to have a discussion, and I have to apologize. I have to leave for about 5 minutes, but if we can start this discussion, I will return in less than 5 minutes. Thank you.
One of the things, as you can see during this program, we're trying to show you the commonalities of the various struggles and conditions, not only of our people or African people, but people in general. And the question becomes, how do you get out of these issues of poverty, these issues of not being able to educate the youth, the issues of not having basic decent housing, etc. And it's clear today, looking at the world, that the model that people use on a capitalist model is not and cannot be the solution. And you also can see that because of historical reasons, African people have been dispersed all over the world. We saw films in Ethiopia, films in Venezuela. You're looking at other places, but one of the things you find that we have in common is you have African people living there. So when the question has become, is Pan-Africanism a viable objective, a viable goal? Is it achievable? And I would just would like to give people that to think about and tell me what you think in terms of this concept of Pan-Africanism. We identify and see ourselves as one based upon our collective historical experiences, our collective historical background, our collective historical cultural habits and practices. Can we put together an organization that will be capable of directing images of African people for total interest of unifying the continent of Africa and creating social society? Is this a myth are we talking about, or can this be a reality? So I'd like to just open it up with that question and what some people think. Because right now, when we look at the conditions of our people, they are given all kind of alternatives, which are alternatives that would not lead to that total liberation and freedom as a people. And we think that, Pan-Africanism is one of those. So I'm just curious in terms of where people are at in terms of the process of, when we talk about Pan-Africanism, when we see this as being something feasible.
I would like to weigh in on this, Lee. One of the things I noticed a pattern with the videos that were presented earlier. It seems as if the conditions of the masses of African people in Papua New Guinea, Eritrea, and Venezuela, there was a certain similarity I noticed. It seemed that the masses of African workers were on the bottom in terms of housing, healthcare, and education. And there was a pattern that Garvey noticed when he traveled through various parts of the African diaspora during the teens, during the early part of the 20th century. And the only way we can overcome this is we have to come together as a people, in spite of our religious and ethnic differences, in order to bring about the unification and liberation of our homeland, Africa. Because a united socialist Africa would be able to not only help those Africans at home, but those scattered in the diaspora as well.
Anyone else would like to respond to that question? While we're pondering on that question, I think another issue that was raised throughout this night, throughout this day, was the issues we talk about socialism. And when you talk about socialism in the West, they always have a connotation as that's really something evil, something bad. Inherently speaking, what would be bad about any situation when you talk about looking out for the general welfare of all of the people in society? What would be bad in any system when you talk about having a society where you fight for man and woman to be able to be educated? What would be bad about trying to ensure that no one go hungry? People have access to food. What would be bad about creating people with some sense of dignity and not a means to an end, like they do under the capitalist system? So in terms of under socialism, looking at the tenets, what would be the basis why anyone would oppose that sense of direction, that feel of direction? What would be the rationale? We want all to benefit and not a few. Does that make sense to anyone who's out there in terms of that logic?
Well, that logic says that if I'm concerned about profit, if that's my major motivating force, profit, then I need to exploit people. I need to do whatever is necessary to make a profit. So at the lowest level, if selling drugs to my kids, to my sisters and brothers, to my mother, then I can do that because my primary motivating force is making a profit. And I can rationalize it in a way that it becomes acceptable to me. I can always say, well, if I don't sell it to them, someone else will. And so taking this motivating force, you begin to see how life and death is irrelevant, how humanity becomes just a means to an end of making money, not an end in itself. And so it explains why it's more important for me to be able to sell as many assault weapons as I can, rather than for me to say, I need to figure out how to ensure that little kids aren't killed while they're sitting in school. It becomes easier to rationalize why I can put a blockade and the sanctions on countries for over 60 years, knowing that this blockade and these sanctions are killing countless numbers of people in those countries. It becomes a rationale for how I can wage endless war, how I can figure out where my next war will be before this one ends. And not only that, how much weapons and ammunition I need to sell, how many people I need to kill to make a profit. I mean, when Biden says he can find money for Ukraine, but he can't find money for anything else. He can find money for war, but no money for peace. It shows you the mindset, the philosophy of capitalism. And it shows you where in the list of priorities the human being is placed. Because for them, killing you or me or any of us is nothing. And it's especially nothing if it will stop you from doing something like uniting Africa and possibly causing the capitalists to not have access to uranium or cobalt or the other resources that they're exploiting from Africa today at practically no cost to them, and manufacturing items with it that they sell you for prices that you can't afford, that you spend years of your life paying for, something that they produce from resources that they stole from you. So I think that there is a clear, distinct difference between socialism and capitalism, and that we never really see it because we don't look at it. We're not given the tools necessary to make the analysis and the experiments and the rationales. So I would like to see what the other people who are participating in this topic tonight really think about the question of capitalism and socialism, and which one is just and which one we as a people need to strive to reach, to attain. For me, You know which one I think. What do you think?
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here to add something I think that is very important to the conversation that we're having. And with due respect to everyone, including myself, the people I see on this panel here are older people, mature people, let's say. And I interact a lot with young people. And I can tell you that this conversation here, to the vast majority of the young people I interact with, really means nothing. Because we're not sharing it enough with them. Let us say that for easy reference, the enemy, the capitalists, bombard them with capitalistic stimuli. And they react to it. And they react to wanting a new Lamborghini, the latest Jordans, iPhone, etc. And so I was very moved by those videos that was shown in the beginning, particularly that the Vietnamese and the Korean young people were so articulate in talking about the position that and explaining their position of their communities. I don't know if we have that in an African community, honestly. And I've been around Africa and in America and the Caribbean, of course, obviously. But we are so checkerboarded all over. And I think simply, we don't have to make things complicated. Sharing these videos amongst young people, I think young people will quickly identify with another young person in another part of the world with a different idea from what they have been bombarded with. And I think that is where we need to start. We all know, at our age, we know what the solution is. We know. We don't need to talk amongst ourselves about it, except to maybe reinforce. But I really think, with due respect, we need to get our young people into these conversations, and we need to be creative. I understand it's not going to be easy, maybe. And it may not be that difficult. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised by sending out an invitation to maybe even parents of some of our young people. They may suggest to them, join so-and-so. We organize these discussions. That is how I met Kwame Ture. I met him because there was organized people who put together these talks that he had. And invited him to our unit for him for, and it inspires me to continue what I know a lot has happened since, or interfered and interjected and put a spoke in a spanner in our wheel to stop a lot of things since that era. All of our leaders have been killed, have been eliminated one way or the other. And we're not addressing that. And we need to address it. Right now, our young people are distracted, not just by these capitalistic enticements, but by religion, by a need to belong. And I'm not bashing a religion here, I'm not. But I'm just saying, I'm so impressed by those videos. Stuart, I really need to get, after this, get copies of these to look at and to insert into the program that we're developing. But we need to expose our own young people into these, to let them know that we're not alone in this struggle. There are other people in this world who are struggling also. And how about we reach out to them to collaborate? So I just wanted to add that in the discussion, to bear in mind in whatever we say, that or whatever we're discussing, that we need to find ways to bring in our young people into these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think that we can do it, that we need to build an army of propagandists who will take these issues, these concepts, and take them to our youth and help imbue our youth with these issues.
Thank you. And let me just say one last thing as I'm replying to what Banboze, is that how you pronounce what you just said?
Yes, sister.
I've seen a video circulated and seen or the rap artists, American rap artists, who were enticed to produce the kind of sound, I can't call them music, but the kind of rhythm and sounds that have almost single-handedly denigrated our youth to where we are now, where I grew up in the era of Teddy Pendergrass, for example. And where does that fit in today? And there was a direct and specific and targeted direction of our youth. And I don't see why we can't do the same thing. As you mentioned, propaganda. Why can't we do the same thing? We can do the same thing and challenge them to, well, I know it took a lot of money. It did, they were enticed by money. But if we expose what it has done to us, where we're so desensitized now that calling a woman the B word is nothing now. I cringe when I hear it. It is so dehumanizing and debasing, but our young people now refer to themselves as bees now. I'm just horrified. And I cannot understand, how did we get here under our own watch? I include myself, so I'm not pointing fingers without including, myself, who has been around and seen the denigration of our society right before our very eyes. And it's not impossible to turn it around. It's not impossible. At least we must die trying. That's how I see it. So thank you.
Thank you. Here again, I believe that you're quite correct, sister. But there is a small minority of youth and a small minority of rappers who are progressive and positive, and some of them are revolutionary. The problem is that they're a small minority, and of course, if there was a large majority, we would be free, we'd have a revolution. But this is what we have to work with, and we have to work to enlarge that small minority. We're not starting from scratch. And we have you here. I mean, you're probably the youth in our midst.
Thank you.
I think the sister raised some issues I think all political organization movements have to deal with as relates to our current reality. Clearly, it's a propaganda war that has taken place and been taking place for years around the question of controlling the influences of our youth minds and thoughts and behaviors. And they're doing it very methodically. It's an issue of one, when you have tools such as the movie industry, We have tools such as the educational institution. When you have tools such as radio, anything that can transmit ideas and information, they have consolidated themselves in having these mechanisms where they can put out more disinformation, more images. They can create scenarios where people would desire to be something at the expense of being famous. And that's one of the things that attacking our youth. You know, for example, if you look at some of our schools and education institutions, we no longer even have access to our youth, like talking about it. Most of the time, you know, they are in the authority of these institutions, 8 to 12 to 15 hours a day. And when you're talking about trying to raise ideals and information in these institutions, there's a lot of blockage in terms of what you can do or can say or can bring in, can't bring in. Even though the information may be information very important in terms of our youth development, we got to figure a way how to deal with that. Because right now, they even talking about laws now where if the teacher says something that challenges one of the students' thoughts or something, you know, they're talking about locking the teacher up. What does that imply? Again, it's an attempt to try to make sure they'll maintain the dominancy over what our children would see, feel, and think. And how do we deal with that phenomenon? That's one of the major issues. As the brother and sister would tell me, Brother Robinson, I would like to say some positive stuff, but I can't make no money. So how do we deal with that?
The simple answer, my brothers, that we are amongst a majority of people in the world who are waging a struggle over ideas. It is a struggle that we have to win.
Yeah, Bamboshi, we said we would talk a little bit also about Pan-Africanism. Can you speak a little bit to the audience in essence? Because there's a lot of confusion out here now. Everybody now seems to want to be somewhat a Pan-Africanist because it's becoming fashionable to say that. But what qualifies one to be a Pan-Africanist, and how does Pan-Africanism really fit into the scheme of the suffering African people on a global basis?
I'm sorry. Didn't hear the last question.
I said, how does Pan-Africanism fit in the schemes of addressing the conditions for our people on a global basis? The first thing we need to get clear in terms of being able to identify what is a Pan-Africanist, what is a Pan-Africanist, what are the components. One of the things you mentioned that real clear is you have to have a component of socialism. What other components one must have in order to be a Pan-Africanist, and how does Pan-Africanism fit in the scheme of things of addressing the many problems African people have all over the world?
Well, I think also that for a true Pan-Africanist, Africa must be primary. Africa must be first. It must be our main objective, our main goal. And that is especially important for us here in the diaspora, because there's so many Africans existing outside of Africa that once we look at a united continent, it will put us, the Africans in the diaspora, in a totally different perspective. It will move us from the situation we're in now to a situation where we have cover, we have protection, and we have insurance. So I think it's important for us to look, especially since we're here, at the Africans in this hemisphere, the African diaspora in South and Central America, the Caribbean, the United States, Canada, and wherever else we might be, to how we can work towards uniting Africa, how we can work towards making Africa our priority, our first priority. And that's basically what I'm concerned about. How do we ensure that we work to build a Africa that is the priority of the millions of Africans around the world? You know, I think you made part of this topic, socialism in the 21st century. And socialism of the 21st century was an idea or sets of ideas that came out of the Venezuelan Revolution, that Hugo Chavez was one of the first persons to talk about a 21st century socialism. And what he saw in that socialism was the regional integration, especially of the countries of South America, to oppose imperialism and capitalism and keep them from oppressing and exploiting and literally killing people in South and Central America. I think for us, when we talk about 21st century socialism, it must talk about how the African diaspora is integrated into a Pan-African objective, how this objective become the primary concern, the primary struggle, the primary focus of the Africans in the diaspora and the Africans in Africa, which means that we are talking about not just the struggle of ideas, the struggle of how we change the thoughts, and by that changing the actions of our people, but how do we also plan and execute strategies to go up against neocolonialism, which is one of the primary threats in Africa today, neocolonialism. So I'm still looking forward to hearing what everybody here thinks about this, because we're just a small group. This is not a lecture. This is a discussion. And as such, we all have ideas. We have input. So what do people think?
Can I jump in and
sure you can.
Mention that, not for me, mention that Phoenix 4 has been waiting to say something.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Is your mic muted, brother?
Who is that?
Phoenix 4. Is your mic muted? It doesn't look like it. You should be able to say something.
I think turn on. Yeah, I think go into settings.
His mic is not muted.
Yeah, but it's not showing. I don't know exactly what that means.
Can anyone hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Ah, okay. I've been having a mic problem myself.
Oh, wow.
I was trying to actually alert you all because he's been waiting for a while, but I don't know if he's able to actually be heard. I don't know if they have maybe a device problem on their end.
Yeah, we're not hearing them.
Yeah, I was if he can't make any, if he can't resolve that, I was going to try to address the concern about how we reach the youth, because I think, when we look at these struggles, for now, at least some of us, and I probably all of us recognize here on this particular forum, that the struggles are generational. And I think that without any exception, I believe that all of us recognize that we ourselves were recruited to the movement when we were in our youth. And we became active because of the information and the influence that we became exposed to of those forces who were active in organizing and educating people at that time. And I remember when things were much more difficult then to get people's attention, to get them into a particular forum, to be able to explain ideas and get them to engage on certain topics. We used to have to actually get people to move from one location to another in order to get them to engage together as a collective. Now we have technology where people don't have to move anywhere. They can basically sit wherever they are at their convenience. And we've actually moved to the point where the technology can be such that the discussion can go on without them and they can receive it and listen to it at their leisure. So while these components of aspects of the movement has changed things and made it the information more accessible to those who search for it, and made the people who are trying to expose people to information, has given us more access to people than we've ever had in my lifetime. We still have the difficulty because while all of these technical barriers have been overcome, the system has bombarded, like Sister Adjua said, the youth are bombarded by all kinds of frivolous ideas, thoughts, impulses to do all different kinds of things, such that it takes them away from addressing their own concerns a lot of times and the concerns of people around them. One of the things that was used in the past was the system, the capitalists and their representatives in government organized drug trafficking in order to funnel drugs into our communities, to intentionally push drugs on our youth in order to get them hooked and get them into drugs, along with the music that turned their attention away from the social issues that they were beginning to address because of the organized efforts. They had a two-pronged approach. They attacked the organizations and the individuals in the organizations to destroy them, and at the same time attack the people economically, politically, and culturally. And so we have to try to reorganize ourselves to reconstitute the same kind of fighting mechanism that we had built before, such that we can reach the people with the same intensity of information and engagement in order to readjust and retake their focus and refocus them on the struggles of our people. And I think Bamboshi, he pointed to the fact that there are a small sector of even the entertainment community, some of them who have exposed these conflicts, have exposed the the treachery of the music industry itself, how it has manipulated people, given instructions to the artists to not play certain types of music, but to sing certain types of lyrics, and to force them not to say other types of lyrics. Just like capitalists, when they go and try to impose their regulations and their rules on socialist countries who are trying to develop socialism, they impose themselves such that they make you bend to their values, their interests, and their capitalist ways of doing things for you to make an inch of progress. And so I would propose that we use, like we did before, all of the means that are at our disposal, technical and otherwise, to help to reach the youth and to help to push them and entice them into organizing themselves to reach even broader and broader masses of people. I know it can be done. We know the enemy does it. We just have to organize ourselves to get around our own deficiencies, our personal deficiencies, organizational deficiencies, sometimes our own disagreements in the process of trying to carry out various programs. We have all types of things that get in the way of actually doing that type of work, but we do know that it's possible to be done. And some people are doing some of that work as we speak. We just have to connect these movements so we can continue to amplify the work and the impact of every individual and every organization so that it gets spread over a larger and larger area and becomes more frequent and more intensified in order to have the necessary impact to make headway against all of the frivolous things that the youth are being bombarded by today. And we have to sit down and discuss and plot out and plan, various strategies and ways to do those things. And it also takes resources. We can see that today, because of the technology, it's much, much cheaper than it was, 15, 20, 30 years ago when we started this. And as a member of an organization, I can tell you right now that I have seen, out of the consequence of the capitalist systems and the way it has developed, we were giving more time, more money, and more energy into this effort when we were in our youth than we are doing today, because our level of responsibilities, our relationships have changed, our stages in life, the things that we have to tend to has been diverted from our attention to doing specifically that type of work to doing other types of things. So we have to organize ourselves to become the support base for the youth who carry out the work that we used to do 30 years ago. And we have to figure out how to organize ourselves to do that. Some of the people we will be able to recruit into the organizations that we create, and some of them we will push them to create their own organizations and organize themselves. So we have to do all of that type of activity. And I think the message needs to be put out there that that's exactly what we're trying to do. Sometimes the information about what other people are doing is good, but sometimes they need to hear, to be triggered into action, that we actually are trying to do things that we are seeing other people do, that we know that they have done. We know it's possible because they did it. We know that our ancestors did it in the past. So we know it's possible to be done. There are people around the world, just like in Bolivia, I point to them as an example, against all the cases in Africa where coup d'etats, imperialist-inspired coup d'etats have taken over. We see in Bolivia a few years ago where the imperialists sponsored a coup and they held for a year and the people overturned it because they were organized to respond and keep responding even against the threats and the violence that was imposed on them by the new regime. They came back to overturn it. So we know that it can be done. We just have to show people that it's possible and what's necessary to make that possible. Because as long as they don't see examples, people keep saying they want to do it. I hear it all the time that our youth say, you know, we should be doing these things. We can do this thing. Why aren't we doing these things? Well, we have to show them in order to do those things, we need to do X, Y, and Z. This is what other people have done that allowed them to push back against all these things that are seeing taking place. In Mali, we see today the kids are pushing back against the French troops. We don't know I mean, I don't have access and, you know, ready information to how they are doing it. We know they have to have some type of organization to mobilize themselves to the degree that they are, because they're forcing the government to even say, troops get out. So we know it's possible. We just have to keep exposing our youth in these various pockets where people are, they want to do something. We need to show them that it's possible and give them the framework that is necessary to organize themselves to make it possible in their area. And then we keep replicating those successes and learning from our mistakes, and we keep transferring information across borders, because we know the capitalists organize themselves across borders and have been for centuries. Every time we push against one leader and move them away to get rid of neocolonialists, they push back and they draw on the support from surrounding neocolonial governments. You know, so we have to learn that we have to do the same things. But anyway, I'll stop there.
I would
Thank
like
you,
to
brother.
add. Okay, I would like to add that to Stuart's points, which I agree with, and that we are facing our youth are facing issues that we didn't have to deal with when some of us were coming up. I mean, drug trafficking was not an issue. The worst problem we had to deal with was alcohol and cocaine. And let's see, and since you know, due to various factors, imperialism has gone on an offensive of sorts. And the only way we can counter that is with permanent organization. We were mobilized in early decades. And I think one of the lessons that we draw from that is that we need to form permanent organizations. And also we need to do a better job of teaching our youth our history. And so that because what the capitalists run is all negative images of Africans and Africa and Africans. So we got to teach our youth about our positive images of our humanity and our contributions to human society, because that is not widely known. And capitalists are making it more difficult to teach that sort of thing in the institutions that exist in the diaspora. So we've got to fight against that, but we got to get better organized as a people. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, guys. I think we have about 10 more minutes and we have to start bringing this program to a closing. Any other thoughts, comments on this issue of Pan-Africanism and socialism and moving forward in the 21st century?
I just wanted to ask, since we have people who are on the program, possibly from different areas, different organizations, one of the things that in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, that we encourage is that people organize. And so when we have people who are in attendance at our programs, we'd like to recognize them and have them to show us that what organizations that they're part of, and maybe explain what they're doing towards some of these ends, so that we can further collaborate, understand what we are doing in different parts of the world, and who each of us are, so we can get to know each other, and so we can work to collaborate more on trying to do the things that we see that we need to do in common. So I just wanted to invite those who are participating tonight, if they are in the organization and they're making efforts, if they would, tell us what those are, and briefly.
Okay, I'll jump in and start since I'm A. So I am Adjoa Adoma. I adopted that name, an African name, from my birth name. I was born in Jamaica, living now in Africa for the past about 15 years after moving there, coming from corporate, but been in business after leaving corporate. My background is IT and consulting. Consulting in two of the majors, KPMG, Deloitte Touche, and at Chase Manhattan Bank. Having gone to Africa and having been exposed to Pan-Africanism at a very young age, and through one of my parents, my father was a very strong Pan-African in thought and practice. I saw where my Africa, which I take as my homeland, we are second-class citizens in our own land, and that just cannot be right. And so I'm not with a large organization, but I am with like-minded persons who have associations, very mindful of what happens to people who try to do anything towards change on the continent. I've seen firsthand what happens to people who try, and it's not good. So my focus is on young people, simply because they're the future, and they need to be shown, they need to be directed on a path that will liberate us, let me say. And part of the big problems we have is lack of education in terms of what they need to know to equip them for this change. Because most of them do not know. They just simply don't know. And I know that if they knew, and a few of them have found out and really have been shocked and surprised and wanting to know more and to do more when they get to know. And I realized that religion is what has been a huge distraction. And again, I have nothing, I'm not bashing religion, I'm not at all. But it is so shockingly drug-like in Africa that really it needs some looking into by us as a people, not by the colonials, because in fact it suits the colonials for the distraction religion has on us. And so I think I'm involved with an organization, though, in terms of education, State of the African Diaspora. We are creating a curriculum to be adapted by schools across, not just in Africa, but in the diaspora, in the Caribbean, in America, wherever, that teaches us who we are, our history, and really who we are, because we don't know who we are. A little Chinese boy knows about Confucius and what Confucius is. In fact, Black people know what Confucius is. Indians know what Krishna is. But we don't know, we have been taught to be ashamed of who we are. And we need to debunk that myth, and that comes through education. So that's where I'll start. That education, which includes feeding ourselves, by the way, because what has happened is that the colonials they still write our books, they still write our curriculum, and they still tell us what we should be trying. They're now trying to tell us what we should be eating. And it has been detrimental for us because we have developed our own defense system in our bodies that is being broken down now deliberately. So that is me.
My name is Anthony. I'm an organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC. And I have been for a minute now. Let's see, I'm working to fight against all forms of exploitation of one human being by another, including neocolonialism, which is the primary mechanism that capitalism attacks Africa today. And I want to follow up on what you said about literature, books, and what have you. It is those books that keep our youth not knowing about Africa.
Absolutely.
And that is why, the problems you see is because of Africa has sham independence, and neocolonialism is rampant in Africa. That is a major problem. And we have to get better organized to counter this. And we have to produce our own books that tell the truth about our history and teach that to our youth. And once our youth understand, what our humanity is, one of the many lessons that Malcolm X taught us, then they'll be able to take the appropriate action. But we have to get organized so that we can educate our youth, and then we can be about the business of liberating our homeland for the sake of Africans at home and in the diaspora.
Anybody else? Anthony, before we close out, I'll ask you to make at least two more solidarity statements. We give Mr. Bamboshi Shungo his final thoughts, and then I have some announcements to make. So Anthony, can you share some more solidarity statements that we received for this year African Liberation Day, Palestine Day?
Sure. I'll read a statement from Penny Gamble Williams, who is an indigenous woman to the Western Hemisphere. And let's see, I'll go and get started. Akwene, peace. With gratitude, I greet you. My name is Penny Gamble Williams, an enrolled member and spiritual leader of the Chappaquiddick tribe of the Wampanoag Nation of Massachusetts. I reside in Maryland on the land of the Piscataway, Kanoi, Nacotac people. This is the place where the mighty Chesapeake, Potomac, Anacostia, and Patuxent converge into the Atlantic Ocean. Since the new people invaded Turtle Island Indigenous women have been on the front line to protect children, elders, and Mother Earth. From the Arctic, Canada, the US, Central America, South America, all of the islands, Africa, India, Asia, and islands in the Pacific, women have had to fight for respect. Today, we are all faced with so many challenges. As Indigenous women, violence, war, loss of land, food insecurity, poverty, missing and murdered women have only gotten worse. The more our Mother Earth is trashed, poisoned, and stripped of resources that should be left in the ground, the more likely Indigenous women, elders, and children will be abused. Colonization and corporate greed rule the world. Standing up for the earth and women will shift the energy. Understanding our connection and relationship to the earth and to everyone will be beneficial for the survival of humanity. There are a lot of women who will not stop working to protect children, elders, and the water. The power of Indigenous women on the front line will not stop. One earth, one love, thank you. Blessings to us all, to you all. Apwene, peace. And then I'll read a statement from Haiti Oye. Haiti Oye sends revolutionary greetings and congratulatory wishes on the occasion of African Liberation Day to the All African People's Revolutionary Party GC and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union GC. Further, we extend our firm solidarity to our Palestinian brothers and sisters upon the commemoration of Nakba. In addition, we take this occasion to honor and express our solidarity with Indigenous peoples around the world. The struggles for African, Palestinian, and Indigenous liberation are hallmarked by tremendous courage and unyielding perseverance. These movements have shown time and again what people organized to fight liberation struggles can accomplish and serve as sterling examples to inspire others who follow in their wake, including our own organization's efforts in Haiti. It is an honor to be included in the African Liberation Day NAPA program. We remain in conscious and purposeful solidarity with these struggles and stand ready to act whenever and however needed.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Now, Boshi, your final thoughts on the topic, Pan-Africanism, Socialism in the 21st century.
Yes, my final input would be that we must see Africa as primary. We must work for Pan-Africanism, the total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government. And we must look at how we can impact the diaspora so that the diaspora also sees Africa as primary. I think that there's a host of other things that are happening in the world that we should not shy away from. We need to jump into and assist struggles head on. For example, the struggle of our brothers and sisters from Palestine, which they have been waging since 1948, when the British gave Palestine to the German Jews. I think that we have to be conscious of all the good and progressive struggles that are taking place in South and Central America today, especially we should look at the upcoming elections in Colombia. We should look at the upcoming elections in Brazil, where Lula will most likely be re-elected after being framed and sent to jail by the Trump Jr. president there. We should look at the struggles in Venezuela. Of course, the struggles in Guyana that often do not get our attention, and the struggles of our people in the Caribbean, especially in Barbados, who we have to give kudos to for kicking out the Queen. The struggles of our brothers and sisters in Guyana, in Grenada and Trinidad and Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, especially Cuba. We have to pull all of these struggles together because they're all part of one struggle. We as Africans are one people. I encourage everybody, continue to struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, Namboshi, Anthony, all the participants tonight, and thank you, the listening audience, who have given your time to listen to the message that we try to convey as it relates to Pan-Africanism and socialism. There are two issues that are very important in the future for our people. It becomes wise if you would take some time to learn more about it and don't let someone sidetrack you from it. We believe that this is the path and the correct path to go. This is the way to go forward in the 21st century. I would like to take some liberty right now, and sometimes we wear multi hats. And I would like to say, as a member also of the African Awareness Association, that when we're having this discussion on socialism, the discussion on how to overcome these kind of obstacles that facing in society. Cuba is a good example to take a look at. Cuba has a lot to offer in that area. As a member of the African Awareness Association, every year we take an annual Black History, Education, and Culture Tour Travel Challenge to Cuba. We'll be taking one this year, July the 23rd to the 31st. We'd like to invite anyone who would like to go and see Cuba for themselves, anyone who would like to go because they understand the importance of Cuba, anyone who would like to go because they understand that we owe the debt to Cuba, anyone who would like to go to know what socialism look like, feel like, you come and join us. We'll be leaving from Cancun for a 1-week stay, visiting 3 cities, Guantanamo, Santiago, and Havana. We must be a bridges that connect us. That's what we're trying to do. So we encourage everybody who hear my voice who would like to go is to email us at African Awareness Association, all spelled together, African Awareness Association 2 @gmail.com. We'd also like to encourage you that every Sunday evening at 7 p.m., there's a radio show. We are one of the co-hosts, Africa on the Move, comes on, and we try to speak to issues but most people fail to want to speak to, for whatever reason, refuse to want to speak truth to power. Well, this is what we do at your station. We invite you to check us out every Sunday evening to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And we also, put my head back on as a member of the A-APRP-GC. We want to remind you that this month, for the first year, we have launched African Liberation Month. There have been hosts of activities taking place during this month. If you didn't attend or didn't participate, you still have a chance to do that. We would like to direct you to our website and check out these programs. You can go to our website at www.A-APRP-GC.org. Check out the website, check out the programs, And for the remaining of the month, we have at least 3 more programs remaining. Starting on Saturday, the 28th, we're actually going to be celebrating African Liberation Day and Palestine Day. That will start at 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you can find it on Blog Talk Radio, Africa on the Move. That's tomorrow. Join us for 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. as we celebrate 64 years of African Liberation Day and 74 years of Nakba Day, Palestine Day. Again, tomorrow for 11 to 2. Also on Monday, May the 30th, there'll be a display and there'll be an initiation of the long history that African Liberation Day has taken place under the banner of the APRP and the A-APRP-GC that we will share with you. So check the website out in terms of how you can view the many histories of the struggles of these AIDs that have taken place. The first time you get to see some of them. And also closing out the month, we have a brilliant brother, educator, Pan-Africanist, intellectual, writer. I mean, he's a brother who have dedicated most of all of his life for the interests of the liberation, unification of Africa, African people, Brother Bob Brown. He's going to give you a historical analysis of history that has not been written nor told on the history of this institution, this struggle. Please check us out. Again, that'll be on the 31st on Africa on the Move from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So those are the remaining activities. Again, if you haven't seen other activities, please go to our website at www.A-APRP-GC.org. Again, we'd like to thank everybody for participating. And the only thing we can tell you that the best way that you can serve your people and serve humanity is to be organized. And to be organized, I encourage you to join the organization that is fighting for the liberation of your people and humanity. We'd like for you to take a look at our organization, the All African People Revolutionary Party GC. And you do that by going to our website. But if you don't join our organization, you better join some organization. Because if you don't, you're acting as the enemy to your people. This is the only way you can help Mother Africa, African people, is to be organized. So on that note, we hope to see you tomorrow, the number 2, as we celebrate African Liberation Day, Palestine Day. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing, Brother Lee?
Yes, go ahead.
Before everybody leave, if you want more information and want to stay in touch, leave your name and email in the chat.
Okay. So leave your name, email, and chat if you'd like to be on our list for more information, interested in joining, or just stand in touch. We would love to do that. So until next time, like always, Africans, brothers and sisters, friends and allies, let's always strive to go forward ever, backward never. Thank you.